Hello, welcome once again to this series of reflections. And by the way, if you have been watching these series until now, yes, I have sprained my wrist, so there's no need to get distracted from now on. This is number 3 in the current series, and we put it under the title of Crossing the Threshold. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, just a reminder, these are not lectures. Simply, I'm sharing a few thoughts, questions that have arisen for me out of today's world situation, the very familiar crises that we as a human family are facing. And sharing these reflections in the hope that that will help you to take time to sit back and make your own reflection on where we're living, how we're living, the journey through space-time. And to ask yourself the questions that need to be asked and find for yourself the only answers that will give you an impulse to effective response, action, change. So, shalom, let's get going. Globalization. A very familiar word. We're all used to it, it's part of our everyday language. What does it really mean? Well, for many of us, it means, as I experienced recently, that I had a box of tissues here in Austria, in Europe. But when I read the information on the back of the box, I discovered the tissues had actually been made in China. The wood pulp had been prepared there, sent over to Philadelphia in North America, where it had been folded and prepared and packaged, then sold to Mexico, where I happened to buy it, to bring back to Austria to blow my nose. Is this globalization? We're used to the commercial aspect of that word, or even the communications aspect, no? I'm standing next to somebody in the airport in London, and he's having a business conference with his company in Perth, Australia. And a friend of mine in Anchorage, in Alaska, huddled up in the cold in blankets, is talking, chatting with a friend via Skype who's lounging on the beach in Perth, Australia. Is this what we mean by globalization? No, that's the fallout, some of the basic effects. Globalization. Let's stand back from it. We, you and me, are the most highly developed, complex form of life existing in this cosmos. At least as far as we know at present. We are the human species, and planet Earth is our home. We are the people of global Earth. And like the planet we live on, which is always in motion, constant motion, we too are people who keep moving. We're always migrating from where we are to somewhere else. We move there to settle down there. We migrate. Migration is natural to us on this planet. We migrate for different reasons. Mostly it's because we think the climate or the food supply or the opportunities will be better somewhere else. Or we are forced into migration. We have to get up and run away from the danger of the place we are actually in, whether it's a danger from natural elements like a tsunami or a hurricane that destroys our homes and everything we live by and survive with, a natural disaster, or it could be war. We pick up all we have and run away from the terror of war. We need to survive. But we also migrate, and have done throughout the whole of our history, simply for the adventure of it. The unknown is attractive. The risk. What will we find? So whatever reasons we find for getting up and going from where we are to somewhere else, we are a migration people. Humanity migrates. And whether we are convinced of the theory that says that the first migration began out of the Kalahari Desert in Africa, and from there we spread around the globe, or whether you believe the theory that suggests that the human species developed in different parts of the globe, yes, Africa, but also Australia and the plains of North America, and we spread simultaneously, as it were, from different parts of the globe. One way or another, we have been moving since we became the human species, the human family, and we're still doing it. Why is migration then such a problem in our world today? Simply because in certain areas of our world, the intensity of the numbers of people who are getting up and going somewhere else at the same time has surprised us, and we're not prepared for it. Also, of course, we know of the tremendous economic imbalance there is between different parts of our planet. The people who are surviving on very little by way of natural needs, food, water supplies, and those who, like most of us who are perhaps watching this video, are luxuriating in having everything we need for our physical survival, our physical comfort, our physical development, and our psychological development, all the advantages of research and technology. The imbalance is enormous. And so when people migrate from very little to the overabundant, attitudes need to change. Attitudes? Let's for a moment ask ourselves now, if I am on the static side of the current problem, I'm sitting comfortably in a place on planet Earth that supplies me with all, or almost all, my needs and desires and wants, what is my attitude to those who are migrating? Usually it is fear. Fear of the loss of possessions. And so the answer is the reaction: I must protect myself, I must put up walls, barriers, strengthen our borders, keep them out. We know, we hear it all the time. And for those who are on the other side of the migration situation, who are migrating, what is the attitude there that must perhaps change? An attitude that, well, everything is available. If I move from where I am, where I have very little, and very little hope of the situation changing, to a situation not very far away, say from Africa to Europe, where there is abundance, where everybody has a home and a car and food and a job, and it's all just there to be picked up from the ground. This is our social problem. So one of the things we could take with us, we had coffee to go or questions to go at the end of the last two series. Now this is a question to go in the middle of our reflection. Put myself on both sides of the migration situation, the one who is static and the one who is moving. And ask myself honestly, what are my attitudes to the situation I'm in, and is there anything that can change? Okay, so migration, globalization, normal, natural, inevitable, for different reasons. What is the basic value of the fact that as human people on this globe, we are global people, and there will always be a proportion of our family that is at this moment on the move? One of the things that helps us to realize is that such differences, the diversity among us, the differences of race, nationality, language, culture, economic status, religious tradition, these are just surface expressions of diversity. We have known from the beginning it's part of our original wisdom, and it's caught in the earliest of our scriptures, the Upanishads. The statement, the one who sees all beings in himself and himself in all beings loses all fear. So the fear that I mentioned a moment ago, if it has to be lost, there has to be a considerable change in attitude to myself, and therefore to the rest of the family, friends and neighbours. We know it is not easy to have these changes of attitudes, but we do sometimes try. We have a certain amount of conversations about the possibility of integration. So we discover that there are all these aspects of our diverse family, but they have to live together constantly in a new way. Integration. It only happens when both sides of the moving static divide are willing to let it happen, are open to changing their attitudes to the situation. Otherwise, a simple movement of one culture into another culture doesn't really bring integration. We form ghettos. The people who are moving, desperately clinging together for the survival of their treasured ideals, culture, religious practices, ways of life. And the static, prepared to lock them up into small ghettos, just put walls round them if we can't put walls round the whole of our own culture. And we've done this over and over again in our history as a human family. It really is time we matured into a different approach. After all, we know that integration really does require the willingness of both sides, the static and the mobile and the moving, to expand their understanding. How do we do that? Well, of course, we need dialogue. We need to talk to each other. And what does dialogue mean? Whether it's dialogue in politics or religious traditions, it usually means I explain to you my position, my values, what I'm about, and I sit and listen while you explain yours. That's all. That's where it stops. Nothing changes. Dialogue between peoples, dialogue between traditions. We're all involved in this. Nobody is sitting outside the contemporary global movement of migration. We're having to wake up now to the fact that each individual on planet Earth, each human being, is part of the global family. We are global people. And there will always be a section, like our globe, that is moving, changing. We're not trying to simply merge everything until no culture has any particular value, but to hold the values of all the cultures, the best values of the family, as a common inheritance. You know? And I can feel some of you are saying, oh, this is all very well for those who are involved, in interfaith dialogue or cross-cultural dialogue, and it doesn't enter my life at all. Well, it does, because globalization enters my life. I am a global person, and we're all waking up to the fact. When we move physically, we move as a whole person. We move psychologically as well. Our desires and our ideas and our emotions. Let's just take the interaction of people of different faiths. So people of a different culture and a different faith tradition, basically, have moved into where you are. Or you, we can always do it in reverse, or you have moved into somebody else's living space, where they have a different culture and a different religious tradition. It does take an effort. It takes much more than just learning about the other, or one group learning the language of the other. If I learn German, you must learn Arabic. Come on. It has to go both ways. Willingness to change, openness to the diversity, holding what is precious of both as a common inheritance. But bringing it down from the ideals to the grassroots, what can it really mean? Well, this is where we go into everyday parables, stories of everyday life. A few years ago, I was visiting a mosque in Germany. Yes, a mosque in Germany, with a friend who was doing this for the first time. And she knew, of course, that about the value for the Muslim community, that when they are at prayer, they're there in solidarity with each other. And therefore, they sit close together, side by side, shoulder to shoulder. Very different from what we very often see in perhaps Christian churches, big churches, where somebody is in the front row and somebody's in the back bench and somebody's hiding behind a statue somewhere else. No. There is a sense of, if you go to pray in the mosque, you are there together. And so my friend settled herself down to pray, and a woman came in and sat next to her, smiled, and moved up and rubbed her shoulder against hers. My friend took it as, well, she wants me to move along and make more space, so she smiled and moved along. At which point the other woman didn't quite smile, but got up and moved along too. And, it was, yes, very, very simple interfaith dialogue. Another one that is, yes, this really is a true story, and I can't resist telling it to you because it brings this need to face our global humanity at a very ordinary, everyday situation, in an everyday situation. Sheila was a North Country woman living in the Midlands of England. She was a type, down to earth, no business, no nonsense, speaking the truth, expecting people to work hard, stand up for what they stood for, and having very strong principles regarding politics and religion. So, Sheila was a Catholic. But a large number of people of the Muslim tradition had moved into her area. Of course, she had nothing to do with Muslims. Those people, those Muslims, she needed nothing to do with them. She had her Catholic church down the road, and that's all she needed. It could have been in reverse. It could have been the Muslim community with a Catholic moving into the area, but this is as this was. So we'll take the story as it was. Sheila went backward and forwards about her daily work. No nonsense, get on with it. Until eventually somebody managed to persuade her that she had to begin to open up a little and recognize the people of this different tradition and culture who had moved into her space. So, plucking up all her courage, she wondered what she could do. Now, on the way to the market she went to several times a week, some Muslim man, stranger, had set up a grocery store. And he had all his greengrocery outside on sale. Sheila walked past it several times, looking at the vegetables and wondering if she dare risk buying Muslim vegetables. And one day she had the courage. The potatoes looked all right. Well, you can't do much to a potato, can you? So she decided to buy her first kilo of Muslim potatoes. And lo and behold, they were perfectly normal. In fact, they tasted quite good. So, thinking she had made an enormous progress and added greatly to the world's peace, Sheila continued to buy her kilo of Muslim potatoes. Her 1 kilo of Muslim potatoes bought every week took her into some basic conversation with the man who sold them to her. And they actually began to smile at each other and share a joke or two about the local politicians and so on. Then a problem broke out. There were some riots and some protest movement in the area against the presence of the Muslim people there. Life was getting a little more unfriendly, unpleasant to live there. So when Sheila went down to buy her potatoes, the man who sold them to her didn't look up, didn't smile, didn't exchange even a few words with her. It distressed her, but she didn't know what to do about it. She went home, thought about it, prayed about it, and went back to find the man. Now, the man wasn't selling anything outside the shop. He didn't have many customers. So she went inside the shop. He wasn't there. So she called out and then went through the door that led to his own accommodation, his own rooms behind. And he was sitting there. She crossed a threshold. She went in and sat down next to him, and if you forgive me, I'll try and imitate it, and with the local dialect, she said, "Come on, love, what's got your guts?" Which translated into English or Globalish means, "Come on, friend, what is really worrying you?" And he began to tell her. Integration, dialogue, global peace. Two global people had found each other. This is a true story, and it's happening over and over again. It has to happen. We have to place ourselves next to the other. The static against those who are moving against those who are static. That happens more often. We welcome the people of another culture or religious tradition into our space, and we expect them to move over into our space, into our way of life, into our way of dressing, into our churches or synagogues. They have to be where we are. We have to move over and be where they are. It's amazing what can happen to us when, for example, we are among a small group of Jewish faithful listening to the Psalms for the Sabbath, hearing them crying from the heart, this deep, passionate love of God and fear at the same time. And hearing yourself hear words that are very familiar, perhaps, from the Old Testament. "Listen, O Israel, and I shall be your God, and you will be my people." And feeling yourself almost bowed down to the ground in awe at the tremendous responsibility behind those words. The one who can see all beings in the self, and the self in all beings, loses all fear. Now, we've known that throughout the centuries, the millennia of our existence and our growth as a human family, as a global people. Now it is time really to expand our views, to open our hearts, to lose our fears. The self, of course, that is translated there from the original Sanskrit means the self, the one without a second, the one who alone is, the great mystery of existence, the absolute reality, the truth. You know, God, by so many different names. To discover that we are one people. We are a global people. And as far as we know at this moment, the only human beings in the whole of this cosmos living on this one planet, Earth. And we're only going to discover that if we, all of us, the ones who at this moment who are migrating, and the ones of us who at this moment are static, if we're all prepared to cross the thresholds wherever we find them in our everyday life. There are plenty of questions to take with us in this reflections. So this time, find your own. But shalom, get going.